The night was cold and the marketplace was almost empty. Only the sound of the wind moved through the broken stalls and dusty ground. Lanterns flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the stone path. And among those shadows walked a figure that barely looked alive. She was an alien widow, her long cloak torn and covered in dirt, her eyes hollow from days without food. She walked slowly, as if every step was heavier than the last. Her hands trembled as she touched the wooden tables of the abandoned stalls, hoping to find even a crumb left behind. But the humans in the market saw her and they turned their faces away. Some whispered cruel words. Others simply walked faster, pretending not to notice her starving body. She was different. She was not one of them, and in their eyes she was not worth helping. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "Please, just a piece of bread, just something for my stomach." But no one stopped. No one cared. An old merchant laughed and said, "Go back to your kind, widow. We have nothing for you." Another woman clutched her basket close, as if the starving alien might steal from her. The widow lowered her head, shame filling her heart. Once she had a family, once she had a mate, once she had a place to belong. But war had taken everything. Her people scattered, her mate gone, her clan destroyed. Now she was only a shadow wandering among strangers who hated her. Her legs gave out and she sank to the cold ground, the world around her spinning from weakness. She thought maybe this was the end. Maybe hunger would finish what grief had already begun. Then a small voice broke through the cold air. "Are you hungry?" The widow lifted her head, blinking through tired eyes. Standing before her was a little human girl, no more than 7 years old. The child's cheeks were red from the cold, and her small hands held something wrapped in cloth. The widow could not believe it. A child was talking to her, not with fear, not with hate, but with kindness. Her throat tightened and she tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. "Yes, so hungry." The girl unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a small piece of bread, not fresh, not soft, but food. The girl bent down and placed it gently in the widow's shaking hands. "Here," she said. "You can have this. I was saving it, but you need it more." The widow stared at the bread as if it were gold. Tears filled her eyes, her hands trembled so much she could barely lift it to her mouth. She bit into it, and though it was dry and hard, it tasted like the sweetest thing she had ever eaten. The girl sat beside her on the cold ground, not afraid, not ashamed, just watching her eat with a small smile. The widow's heart twisted. No one had shown her kindness in so long, and now it came from someone so small, so fragile. When the bread was gone, the widow tried to speak again. "Thank you, little one. Thank you for saving me." Her voice broke into sobs, but the girl only looked at her with steady eyes. The girl then said something that froze the widow in place, words she never expected to hear. "If you're hungry, come with me. Be my mom instead." The widow's breath caught. She stared at the child. Sure, she had heard wrong, but the little girl's eyes were serious, her voice firm, as if she truly meant it. The alien widow's heart raced. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. How could this human child say such words? Words that cut deeper than any wound. She had lost her mate. She had lost her children. She had lost her place in the universe. And now a stranger's daughter was offering her something she thought was gone forever. Her lips trembled as she whispered back, Why would you say that to me?" The little girl only smiled and said, "Because you look lonely, and I need a mom." The wind howled across the empty market. The stars above flickered in the night sky. And for the first time in years, the alien widow felt something stir inside her chest, not just hunger, not just pain, but hope. A fragile hope born from the words of a little human girl. And so, the night that began with shame and hunger ended with a question that would change everything. A child's innocent offer that carried more power than any weapon or war. The alien widow sat frozen. Her eyes locked on the child, her heart whispering that perhaps her story was not over yet. Perhaps it was just beginning. The alien widow sat on the cold ground, staring at the little human girl who had just spoken those impossible words. "Be my mom instead." The widow's heart beat like a drum. She wanted to believe it, but she also feared it was just a child's game. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Child, you do not understand. I am nothing. I have no home. I have no family. I am only a stranger." She shook her head slowly, her voice heavy with shame. But the girl only leaned closer, her small face lit by the weak glow of a nearby lantern. "You are not nothing," the girl said firmly, her voice surprisingly steady for someone so young. "You are hungry, you are cold, and you need someone. Just like I do." The widow blinked, shocked by the honesty in the child's words. The widow could not help but ask, "Where is your mother?" The girl's eyes softened, and she lowered her gaze to the dirt ground. "She is gone," the girl said quietly. "I don't remember her much, only that she used to sing to me before bed. But she left, and now it is only me and my dad." The widow's chest tightened. The pain of loss was something she understood too well. She reached out with her trembling hand but stopped halfway, afraid the child might pull away. But the girl did not move. She simply looked at the widow with wide, hopeful eyes. "Come with me," the girl said again. "I can share my blanket. You can stay by our fire, and my dad will not be angry. He always listens to me." The widow shook her head quickly, fear filling her voice. "No, your father will not want me there. He will chase me away. I am an alien widow. Your people already look at me as if I am dirt." But the girl giggled softly, as if she found the words silly. "My dad listens to me," she said again. "If I tell him I want you, then he will let you stay because he loves me, and if he sees you are kind, he will love you too." The widow felt tears sting her eyes. The words were too heavy, too dangerous. Hope was like fire, and she was afraid of getting burned. Still, her starving body longed for warmth, and her lonely heart longed for connection. The girl stood up and tugged at the widow's hand. "Come on," she said with a bright smile. "My house is not far. I know the way. It is small, but it is safe." The widow hesitated, her mind screaming that this was madness. Yet her hand slowly let the girl pull her up. Her legs wobbled, her body weak, but the child's grip was surprisingly strong, leading her out of the cold market. As they walked through the narrow streets, the girl talked endlessly, her voice cheerful despite the late hour. "We have a fireplace. I like to sit near it and listen to the wood crackle. My dad makes soup. It is not always tasty, but it is warm. I will ask him to make it for you too." The widow listened in silence, each word from the girl like a thread pulling her back from despair. She did not know why this child trusted her, but she could feel her frozen heart slowly thawing. Finally, they reached a small wooden house at the edge of the settlement. The windows glowed faintly with light. Smoke rose from the chimney. The smell of burning wood touched the widow's nose, and it was the sweetest smell she had known in years. The girl let go of her hand only to push the wooden door open. "Come inside," she said softly. "No one will hurt you here." The widow hesitated at the threshold, fear and hope battling inside her, but the warmth spilling out from the doorway was too much to resist. Inside, the small room was simple. A fire burned in the stone hearth. A wooden table stood with only 2 chairs, and a blanket lay folded on the floor near the corner. The widow stood awkwardly, unsure where to go, unsure if she truly belonged here. The girl ran to the hearth and grabbed another piece of bread from the table. "This is for you," she said, handing it over. "I saved it too because I thought maybe someone might need it. Now I know it was you." The widow took the bread, her hands shaking again. She whispered, "Why are you so kind to me?" "Your people despise mine." The girl only shrugged with a small grin. "Because I know what it feels like to be lonely, and I don't like it." The widow sat near the fire, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hide. She had begged in the marketplace and received only cruelty, but here in this small wooden home she was given bread, warmth, and something even greater, hope. Her mind told her this could not last, that soon the father would come home and chase her away. Yet her heart whispered another truth. The girl's words were like seeds planting deep inside her, words no one had spoken to her in years. "You can be my mom," the girl repeated softly, as she pulled the blanket over the widow's tired shoulders. "I don't care what anyone says." The widow closed her eyes, the fire warming her cold skin. And in the silence of that fragile night, she allowed herself to believe, even if only, for a moment, that maybe this child was right. Maybe she could still be something more than a hungry stranger. The fire crackled softly inside the small wooden house. The alien widow sat near it, her cloak still damp with cold. The little human girl curled beside her, smiling with sleepy eyes. Outside the wind howled, but here the warmth was almost enough to make the widow forget the world. Then the sound of heavy footsteps broke the peace. The door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside, his face tired, his shoulders heavy with the weight of long work. He carried a bundle of wood and a worn-out bag. His eyes immediately caught the stranger sitting by the fire. He froze, his face hardening. The bundle slipped from his hand. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. His eyes narrowed on the cloaked alien widow. The girl ran to him quickly, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Dad, don't be angry. She was hungry. She was cold. I brought her here." Her little voice trembled, but carried a strange courage. The man's eyes flicked back to the stranger, his jaw tightening. "You brought her here?" he asked. "An alien? Into our home?" The widow lowered her gaze, shame burning her cheeks. She wanted to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She feared he would throw her out into the night before she could explain. The girl tugged at his arm, her eyes shining with tears. "She is kind. She was starving. No one helped her, but I gave her bread and she thanked me. Please don't send her away." The father crouched down to his daughter's level, his tired eyes softening slightly. "Little one, you cannot just bring strangers home, especially not." He stopped himself, glancing again at the widow. "Especially not someone like her." The girl's lip trembled, but she lifted her chin bravely. "She is my mom now," she said firmly. "I told her, and she agreed to stay." The man's heart skipped. Shock flashing across his face, he looked back at the widow who sat frozen by the fire, her hands gripping her torn cloak, her eyes glistening with tears she could not hide. The widow shook her head quickly. "No, I did not say, I did not promise," she whispered. "She only showed me kindness and I could not refuse." Her voice broke, but she forced herself to look at him. "I mean no harm, sir. If you wish, I will leave at once." The father's chest tightened. He could see her weakness, the hunger in her trembling body, the shame in her lowered eyes. He remembered how his wife once looked when she was ill, fragile and small before she left this world. The girl clung to his arm desperately. "Please, Dad, don't send her away. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want a mom." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The father closed his eyes, his breath heavy. He wanted to protect his daughter, but also to shield her from disappointment. He had seen what people said about aliens, how neighbors whispered, how hatred grew easily, and he feared what would happen if the town learned. He had let one into his home. Finally, he stood tall, his voice low. "She can stay tonight," he said slowly. "Only tonight, until the storm passes. After that, we will decide." The girl's eyes lit with joy. She hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, then hurried back to the widow. "You see, you can stay. You are safe now." The widow felt warmth spread in her chest, but fear lingered. She whispered softly, "Thank you, sir. I will not cause trouble. I will not take more than you can give." The man nodded stiffly, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. He set down his bag and placed the wood into the fire, his movements heavy, as if his body carried the weight of decisions he did not want to make. The room settled into uneasy silence. The fire crackled. The girl hummed softly as she leaned against the widow's side, slowly drifting to sleep. The widow placed a hand on the child's hair without thinking, her heart aching. The father watched from the corner, his eyes sharp, his mind torn. He wanted to trust, but trust did not come easy. Not after all the pain his family had suffered. Not after losing his wife. Not when a stranger of another kind sat so close to his only child. As the night stretched on, the father sat at the table, his eyes never fully leaving the widow. She sat quietly, never moving except to adjust the blanket around the girl. Her face was tired, her eyes filled with sorrow. But in them, he also saw something else. Something he could not name yet. When the fire burned low, he finally spoke again, his voice rough. I don't know who you are or what you've done. But understand this, if you hurt my daughter, there is no place in this world you can hide from me." The widow lowered her head, her voice breaking. "I would rather die than harm her," she whispered. "She gave me bread when no one else would. She gave me hope when I had none. I will never betray that gift." The father studied her in silence. His doubt remained, but something in her voice, in her trembling words, told him she spoke the truth. The storm raged outside, but inside the small home, 3 lives now sat under the same roof, bound not by blood, not by trust yet, but by a fragile thread of kindness that might grow stronger or break apart with the dawn. The morning came slowly, light breaking through the small cracks in the wooden house. The fire had died down to faint embers. The alien widow opened her eyes, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard floor. Beside her, the little human girl still slept peacefully, her small hand resting on the widow's torn cloak. For a moment the widow felt peace, but then she remembered where she was, in a stranger's home under the suspicious eyes of a man who did not trust her. Her chest grew heavy with shame. She knew she did not belong. She was only a burden. The father was already awake, sitting at the wooden table with his arms crossed, his eyes sharp, watching her every move. His face carried the same expression as the night before, not anger, not kindness, but doubt. "You are still here," he said coldly, his voice like stone. "I thought maybe you would leave before sunrise." The widow lowered her head, unable to meet his gaze. I should have," she whispered. "But your daughter held me close in her sleep. I did not have the heart to move away." The man's jaw tightened. He looked at the girl sleeping so peacefully, then back at the widow. "She is a child. She doesn't understand what she is asking for, but I do. I cannot keep you here, not when the whole town already hates your kind." The widow's hands shook. She pulled her torn cloak tighter around her thin frame. "I know," she said softly. "I am nothing but trouble. I have nothing to give. No dowry, no clan, no honor. My people are scattered. My husband is gone, and my name is cursed. If you send me away, I will not blame you." Her voice cracked with the weight of her own words. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She hated how weak she sounded, how pitiful she looked. Once she had been proud. Once she had walked among her people with dignity. Now she begged only to survive. The father studied her carefully. His eyes narrowed as if trying to decide if she spoke the truth. There was no defiance in her, only sorrow, only emptiness. It was not the look of a liar. It was the look of someone who had lost everything. The girl stirred awake, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists, when she saw the widow still beside her, her face lit with joy. She jumped up and hugged her tightly. "You didn't leave," she said brightly. "I was scared you would go." The widow hugged her back, though shame burned deeper inside her. "I should go, little one," she whispered. "I do not belong here." But the girl shook her head fiercely. "No, you are my mom now. You promised." The widow's throat tightened. "I did not promise, child," she said with trembling lips. "But your words were too kind. I wanted to believe them." The father stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You, see? She knows she should leave," he said firmly. But his daughter turned to him, her eyes filling with tears. "No, Dad. She is not bad. She is not dangerous. She is just hungry, like me when you work late and I wait all night. Don't make her leave." Her little voice broke, and the father's heart cracked with it. He hated to see his daughter cry, but he also feared what others would say if they discovered an alien widow in his home. The widow knelt down, her hands shaking as she placed them gently on the girl's shoulders. "Listen to me, little one. I am not worthy of being your mother. Your father is right. I am only a burden. You deserve better than me." The girl clung to her tightly, refusing to let go. "I don't want anyone else. I want you." Her voice was fierce, and the widow's heart shattered under its weight. The father turned away, running a hand over his tired face. He could not fight both his daughter and his own guilt. The woman before him looked broken, but the way the child clung to her made something stir in him too. Finally he sighed, his voice low. "You may stay. For now, but only until you find your strength again. After that we will see." The widow bowed her head, her tears dripping onto the floor. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was filled with shame. She hated that she had nothing to give in return, nothing to prove her worth. The girl smiled and hugged her tighter, as if her father's reluctant words were the happiest gift she had ever heard. The widow felt warmth in her heart, but shame still weighed heavy. She could not shake the thought that she did not deserve this kindness. Later that day, as the father chopped wood outside, neighbors passed by and whispered. Some pointed, some frowned. The widow sat inside, hearing their voices through the thin walls. She knew the rumors had already begun. She sat by the fire, her hands clasped, her body trembling. "I will only bring trouble to this house," she thought. "He is right to doubt me. His people will never accept me. Maybe even his kindness will fade." But when the little girl placed her small hand into hers and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I will protect you," the widow broke into silent sobs, shame and hope mixing together, her heart torn between leaving to protect them and staying because she could not bear to walk away. The widow's shame grew heavier that day, but so did the fragile bond tying her to the child and her father, a bond that might break under the weight of the world or grow strong enough to change everything. The sun sank slowly behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The father returned from chopping wood, his hands rough and tired, his face set in the same doubtful lines as before. Inside the small house, the widow sat quietly near the fire, her cloak folded around her. The little girl rested in her lap, humming softly, as if nothing in the world was wrong. The father placed a pot over the fire, pouring water and adding a few thin vegetables. The smell of stew began to rise. Simple, nothing rich but warm enough to fill the air with comfort. The widow's stomach tightened at the smell. She lowered her head in shame, afraid to show her hunger. The girl bounced on her feet, rushing to the table. "Dad, make it quick, she is hungry," she said with excitement, her small hands clapping. The father gave her a tired smile, but his eyes flicked to the widow with doubt. "She can eat," the girl continued. "We can share." Her words were filled with innocence, the kind of innocence that ignored the cruelty of the world. The father stirred the pot slowly, his jaw tight. Finally, he ladled stew into 3 wooden bowls, placing one before his daughter, one before the widow, and keeping one for himself. The widow stared at the bowl, her hands trembling. She could not remember the last time someone had placed food before her with no demand, no cruelty. She lifted the spoon slowly, her eyes filling with tears. The stew was thin, watery, but when it touched her lips, warmth spread through her chest. It was the taste of kindness, something she thought she would never have again. The girl slurped happily, glancing at the widow with a bright grin. "See, I told you. Dad makes soup. It is not fancy, but it is warm." The widow nodded softly, her throat too tight for words. The father watched silently, eating slowly, his eyes always flicking to her, studying her every movement. He did not trust easily, but something about the way she held the spoon with trembling hands, the way she ate with both hunger and restraint, told him she was not here to deceive, she was simply surviving. After a few moments, the widow lowered her spoon and whispered, "Thank you," her voice shaking. "I do not deserve this, yet you gave it to me. I will not forget." The man grunted softly, his voice rough. "It is only food, don't make it more than it is." But inside his heart shifted slightly. He remembered the words of his late wife, who used to say that sharing even a small meal with someone in need could change their soul. The girl leaned across the table, her bright eyes shining. "Now you are really my mom, because we ate together. Families eat together," she declared. Proudly, the widow froze, her heart aching, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back tears. I cannot be your mother," she whispered softly. "But I will protect you, little one. I will keep you safe if you let me." The girl only giggled. "That's what a mom says." The father looked away. His spoon paused in midair. The words cut deep into him, too. For years he had lived with only his daughter, trying to fill both roles. Now hearing the child so easily accept this stranger stirred fear, and something else inside him. something he did not want to name. After the meal, the widow began to gather the bowls, her weak arms struggling to carry them. "I will clean these," she said quickly. "I must give something back." The father frowned. "You don't need to." But she insisted. "No, I must. I cannot take without giving, even if it is only this." She carried the bowls to the corner basin, washing them carefully with water that was already cold, her hands raw from the icy touch but her heart lighter. For the first time she felt she had given something, even if small. The little girl wrapped herself in a blanket and sat by the fire, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Mom," she whispered softly, her voice barely a breath. "Don't leave tonight, stay here with us." The widow turned, her heart aching at the sound of that word spoken with such trust. She looked at the father, waiting for his rejection, but he only sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Stay," he muttered, "at least until morning. We will see after that." The widow lowered her head. "Thank you," she whispered again, though shame still lingered in her voice. The fire burned lower, the room wrapped in silence. The widow lay near the hearth. The girl curled against her. The father sat at the table, watching them both with eyes that carried doubt, but also a flicker of something new, something unspoken. That night under the roof of a simple human home, 3 souls ate from the same pot, shared the same warmth, and took the first fragile step toward something more than survival. The widow closed her eyes, her heart whispering a vow she never thought she would make again. "I will not abandon them, not while I still breathe." And though shame still clung to her like a shadow, for the first time since she lost her people, she felt the faint stirrings of belonging. The days passed slowly, and the alien widow began to feel the warmth of the small wooden home. She cleaned, she cooked when she could, though her hands were clumsy with human tools. She mended the girl's clothes with rough stitches, and each night she sat by the fire, listening to the soft laughter of the child. But outside the house, the world was not so kind. Neighbors noticed the cloaked figure moving through the yard. They whispered to each other, voices filled with suspicion. Some spat on the ground when she passed. Others muttered curses under their breath. The widow tried to ignore them, but she felt their stares burn her back like fire. Shame pressed harder on her chest. She wondered if she had made a mistake by staying one afternoon. As she fetched water from the well, 2 men approached, their faces hard. "Why are you here?" one demanded. "You should not walk among us." His voice carried the sharpness of hate. The widow lowered her gaze, holding the bucket close. "I mean no harm," she whispered, but they stepped closer, blocking her path before they could. "Say more." The little girl ran up, clutching the widow's arm. "She is my mom," the girl shouted boldly. "Don't be mean to her." The men looked at each other, disgust twisting their faces. "A child should not speak such lies," one muttered, then walked away. The widow's hands shook as she pulled the girl close, fear filling her chest. "You must not say that to others," she whispered urgently. "They will hate you for it, they will hate me too." But the girl only smiled up at her. "I don't care, you are mine." That night, when the father returned, he found the widow sitting near the fire with tear-stained cheeks. She told him about the men at the well, her voice breaking. "I am bringing danger to your home. You must send me away." The father's face hardened. He slammed his hand on the table. "This town has sharp tongues," he growled, "but sharp tongues do not decide who lives under my roof." His words carried strength, but his eyes showed doubt. As the days went on, the whispers grew louder. Groups of men began to gather outside their house, muttering that it was wrong to shelter an alien, wrong to let a stranger sit where humans belonged. The widow sat inside, clutching the girl close, her heart pounding with fear. One night the whispers turned into angry voices. Torches flickered outside the windows. Shadows of men moved across the walls. The father stood at the door, his fists clenched. The widow trembled by the fire, ready to be cast out. Then the sound of glass shattering broke the silence. A stone flew through the window, landing near the hearth. The girl screamed, clinging to the widow's side. The widow wrapped her arms around her, pulling the child close, shielding her with her own body. The father's heart twisted at the sight. He turned to see the widow crouched protectively over his daughter, her face pale but her eyes fierce. She whispered again and again, "I will not let them touch you, little one. I will not let them touch you." The crowd outside shouted louder, demanding the alien be thrown out, their words filled with hate. But inside, the father saw something he had not expected. For the first time, he did not see a burden. He did not see shame. He saw a mother born not of blood but of choice, a mother who would stand between danger and his child without hesitation. He stepped outside, facing the crowd, his voice rough but steady. "This is my house, my roof, my fire," he said firmly. "No man here will tell me who can share it," the men grumbled, anger flashing in their eyes. But none dared step forward. Slowly the crowd dispersed, their torches fading into the night, the whispers trailing away into silence. When he stepped back inside, the widow was still holding the girl, her body shaking, her eyes filled with tears. But she had not moved. She had not let go. The father knelt beside them, placing a hand on her shoulder for the first time. "You are brave," he said softly, "braver than most who shouted outside tonight." The widow looked at him in shock, unable to find words. The girl smiled sleepily, still clinging to her. "See, Dad?" she whispered. "I told you she is my mom." Then drifted into sleep in the widow's arms. The fire crackled. The night grew quiet. The father sat beside them, his doubt still lingering but his heart slowly changing. He had seen the truth with his own eyes.
The widow, once ashamed, once ready to run, now sat holding the child with fierce love, and though fear still filled her chest, something stronger had begun to grow, a bond forged not by blood but by courage. Shadows from her past had followed her to this place, but in this small wooden house, she found herself standing against them, not alone, but as part of something she had long thought lost. The night after the crowd came felt heavier than any before, the broken window let in the cold wind. But inside the small house the fire burned bright. The widow sat with the girl still in her arms, the father nearby, his face tense, his mind restless. He had seen her bravery, he had seen how she shielded his daughter with no thought for herself, yet doubt still whispered in his heart. He wondered if he could truly let an alien widow be part of his home. Could he bear the weight of what the world outside would say? The widow stirred gently, laying the girl down on the blanket near the fire. She rose slowly, her body weak, her voice soft. "I will leave in the morning," she said, her eyes lowered. "I have brought nothing but trouble. I will not risk your daughter's safety again." The father stood, his chest tightening. "You think leaving will protect her?" he asked firmly. "Those men outside do not hate only you. They hate anything different, anything they cannot control. If you leave, they will only grow bolder. If you stay, at least she has someone willing to fight for her besides me." The widow's breath caught, her eyes wide. "But I am nothing," she whispered. "I have no strength, no clan, no honor. I cannot even stand before your people without trembling." The father shook his head slowly, stepping closer. "You call yourself nothing, but tonight I saw you become everything. You were a shield, you were a mother. No bloodline can give that, only love." His voice was rough, but carried truth. The widow's tears fell silently. She had lived so long in shame that she had forgotten what it meant to be seen for who she truly was, not as a burden, not as an alien, but as a person. The girl stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, "Mom, don't go." The word hit the widow's heart like a spark. Her trembling hands covered her face. She sank to her knees, torn between shame and longing. The father knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You are not alone anymore," he said quietly. "My daughter chose you, and I cannot ignore what I saw. Maybe the world outside will never accept you, but here, under this roof, you belong." The widow's body shook with sobs. She tried to speak but her voice broke into silence. The father did not push her. He only sat with her by the fire until the tears slowed. The next morning the sun rose golden, painting the small house in soft light. The widow woke to the smell of bread warming by the hearth. The girl skipped to her side, holding a wooden cup of milk. "Breakfast, Mom," she said proudly, the word rolling off her tongue as if it had always been hers. The widow's lips trembled. She glanced at the father, waiting for him to correct the child, but he only gave a tired smile. eat, he said simply. We have work to do. The day was not easy. Whispers still followed them when the widow fetched water, when she walked with the girl through the narrow streets, but now the father walked beside them, his tall frame silent but unyielding. No one dared step too close. That evening, after the day's labor, the three of them sat together for another meal. The girl chattered happily about the birds she saw by the well, about the flower growing near the fence, about how the stew tasted better tonight. The widow listened with a soft smile. The father watched quietly, his doubts fading piece by piece. When the meal was done, the girl pulled the widow close and whispered, "Now we are a family, right?" The widow hesitated, her eyes filling again, before she could answer. The father spoke, his voice steady, "Why?" "Yes, we are," the girl beamed, clapping her hands, then leaned against the widow's side, her small face glowing with joy. The widow's heart soared and broke at the same time. She had thought her life ended in ruins, yet here, in a wooden house on the edge of a human town, something new had begun. The father rose and placed more wood into the fire, then turned to her. "You no longer need to call yourself nothing," he said firmly. "You are part of this home now, whether the world accepts it or not." "We do." The widow covered her mouth, the weight of his words overwhelming. For so long she had been cast aside, unwanted, unseen. Now she was wanted, now she was seen. The fire burned warmly, the wind outside faded into quiet, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, the widow felt whole again. That night, she whispered a vow in the silence of her heart: "I will protect them, I will love them, I will never walk away." Her shame was still there, but it no longer ruled her. It had been replaced by something stronger, something human, something eternal. And so, the alien widow, once starving and lost, found herself reborn, not by her people, not by her past, but by the love of a child who called her mom, and a man who, at last, called her family.